We want to conclude the study that we started on youth discipleship, and we've pulled 7 things from the course, the mobile home, the Christian home, and church that we've been looking at for this conference. And we are looking at the protection from the pop culture. 7 things that adults, parents, and young people need to put in place today if they're going to be protected from the pop culture, which is devouring so many young people. And we looked at, number 1, that parents must be in control of their children. And number 2, that everything must be open and accountable. And if the children are allowed to have phones or tablets or whatever, that the parents must have access to them. The parents must be able to know exactly what is there. The parents need to have all of the passwords and whatnot. And then protection number 3, we must remove temptations and dangers from the phone and any other devices. And we've looked at some of the greatest dangers that are devouring young people: the pop music and the music videos, video games. Some of them are so addictive that they are likened to crack cocaine, such as World of Warcraft. It's called World of Warcrack. And Halo 3 is called Halo Addiction because they're so incredibly addictive. And even in remote places like Nepal, young people are becoming extremely addictive to video games. And then pornography. And we've looked at the addictive quality and the power of pornography and how that a large percentage of the internet today is devoted to pornography. And we've looked at the warnings of the Word of God in regard to a man's visual sexuality and how powerfully tempting it is to him to see a woman improperly clothed, and how that once he begins to look, that it's a downward slide that we read about in Romans chapter 1. Pornography will do the following things and more. It will enslave you. It has the power to carry you ever deeper and into unspeakable regions of moral filth. It will pervert your way of looking at women and hinder your ability to have proper relationships. If you're single, it will ruin your chance for a truly pure marriage. If you're married, it will harm or even destroy your marriage. It will hurt your children, and it will hurt your testimony and bring shame and disgrace. And I've seen it in many men's lives. And so all of these great moral dangers that come to us today from the pop culture directly into devices like a smartphone must be removed, entirely avoided like the plague. There's no other way of safety. It's like playing with a poisonous snake. If you play with a poisonous snake, you will eventually be bitten. A man named Bill Haast was a famous snake handler and snake milker, headquartered in Florida. But he was bitten 173 times. He was an expert, and yet he was bitten. One of his hands looked like a claw because of the poison. After a cottonmouth moccasin bit his finger, it instantly turned black, and his wife snipped it off with garden clippers. His first wife divorced him because of his obsession with snakes. And playing with a poisonous snake is not nearly as dangerous as playing with these things we just mentioned, that the devil tries to entrap people today, not only young people, but especially young people. And so the protection is to totally get these things out of our lives, to not allow any of these things into our lives or on our devices. But I want to mention protection number 4, and especially for young people, but it is to avoid conversations with the wrong people. Conversations with the wrong people. We see in Proverbs 30, verses 18 and 19, the danger of this. In Proverbs 30, verses 18 and 19, especially talking about boys and girls, but even men and women. A pastor friend told me recently that his father, now this is a grown pastor, has children, but his father recently developed a relationship with a woman on Facebook and committed adultery. And that woman was in his son's church. And so this is not just a problem for young people, but we see in Proverbs 8:30, verses 18 and 19, there be three things which are too wonderful for me. Yea, four which I know not. The way of an eagle in the air, yet it's very mysterious and wonderful to see. The way of a serpent upon a rock. How in the world does a serpent go along a rock? The way of a ship in the midst of the sea, and the way of a man with a maid. And men have a way with maids. There's a great danger there for the maids to be enticed and to be deceived. That happened in Genesis chapter 34 to Dinah, the daughter of Leah, one of Jacob's children. And the Bible says in verse 1 that she went out to see the daughters of the land. Probably very innocent endeavor. Let's go meet the other young ladies out here. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her, and he deceived her. And that has happened multitudes of times, and it is happening now because of the internet, which is facilitating this. Recently, a girl in one of our village churches made a profession of faith just a few months ago, and had looked very promising. That she was actually saved, that she would go on to serve Christ, looked very promising, and yet she met a man on Facebook and ran off with him. And she said she waited. She knew it was wrong, and she weighed it all, in the balances, and then ran off with this man because of all of the things he said to her by Facebook. And that's in a village that barely has toilets. But young people get on Facebook with the phones. A Nepali girl told my wife a very sad story last year. A man began to call her and to woo her on the phone. He told her that he had passed, that he was a high school graduate, that he had a good job, that he didn't drink, and it was all a lie, but she ran off with him. And he quickly learned that everything was a lie. He soon left her for another woman. And she said to my wife, I shame my parents. They don't want me back. I've ruined my life. Pastor friend in Nepal, one of the girls in his work, she got a SIM card from another person. SIM card is what drives these phones. Every country I go to, I get a new SIM card so I can operate in that country. And so she got a SIM card from somebody else, and she got a telephone call on her phone because this man thought he was calling somebody else. She answered the phone. She allowed the man to talk to her, continued to converse with him. She kept saying, I don't want to talk to you. Please don't bother me. But he kept persisting. He kept calling. He threatened. He said, he begged her to run away with him, to marry him. And he said, I'll commit suicide if you don't do it. And anyway, eventually she ran off with him and destroyed her life, spiritually, morally. Be very, very, very careful about conversations with the wrong people, conversations with members of the opposite sex. And if your parents love you enough and your spiritual leaders love you enough to put restrictions on your life, then you need to respect that and have enough sense to obey those rules, because those rules are very important for young people. Protection number 5, we need to use every type of control that is available in this electronic age. There is accountability software such as Covenant Eyes, which I use, but it can be purchased for the whole family. And it's a covenant with whoever you decide to be your partner. In my case, it's my wife, but it could be your pastor, it could be your friend. And everything that you look at on the internet, a report goes to that covenant partner at the end of the month or weekly, whatever. A report about every site that you visited, and it's actually graded, and it's a great protection. When you're looking around on the internet and you may be tempted to look somewhere where you shouldn't, go to some site that you know is questionable, and many of the news sites are very questionable. One of the most popular news websites in England, can't remember the name of it right now, but it's on the right side is just pornography. Pictures, the latest pictures of the Hollywood movie stars or British movie stars unclothed. It's pure pornography, but it's a news site. And so accountability software, filters are very helpful. One is called Clean Internet, which is operated by some fundamental Baptists. It's operated by a member of Fairhaven Baptist Church in Chesterton, Indiana. Parents need to check every app before it's allowed to be put on the children's phone or iPad or whatever, and make sure that it is acceptable, that it cannot be used for texting. Texting is one of the great ways that young people are getting into trouble. It's communicating with the wrong people. But these devices have made it very easy to communicate with the wrong people. And there are other protections, but parents need to use every type of control that is available. We've mentioned a couple other things in this book, The Mobile Phone and the Christian Home and Church. And we've gone into that section more deeply than we can here. And then protection number 6, don't let young people have phones or any such device when they are alone and unsupervised. That's when the trouble happens. I've mentioned already 2 examples of how that happened in godly homeschooling families recently. The one young man whose father is a pastor and who, unknown to his parents, was accessing the internet at night and was reading things. He's a studious young man. He wasn't looking at pornography and he wasn't watching music videos. He was reading the writings of atheists like Richard Dawkins. And the young people told me, in that church, I preached in that church, that this young man had a good testimony. The other young people looked up to this young man in the church. But today he thinks he's an atheist. And the other young girl that I mentioned in a pastor's home, homeschooling family, very godly family, very close-knit, and she, unknown to her parents, used access to the internet that she had because of homeschooling and developed more than one relationships, wrong relationships, heart-level relationships with young men. And went head over heels with a young man that she has never met. But the great emotional attachment was developed. And when the parents found out about it, they've had a great struggle to bring her back into a right relationship with the Lord and with them, and to get these big secrets out of her life, to bring her back into the light. And so there's great dangers here. These are just a couple examples. I hear about this everywhere I go. And this has always been the case, that when young people are alone with devices and being able to communicate with the world, that they get into trouble. But now, today, it's just all taken to a more dangerous level because of the technology, the internet. I mean, Pastor Dave Sorensen tells how that his father was a pastor, and his father bought him a little transistor radio, and one of the early little portable radios, battery operated, and it allowed him to have it. And at night, in his room, in his privacy, he would listen to the world's music on that little radio. And it captured his heart and took him very far from the Lord. And so that's always been a danger, but now it's much, much, much more because of the technology today. And so the parents must be very, very careful. And we think about how careless so many parents are today. So many. Not hardly knowing what their children are doing. There's a lady in our church, has 3 children. My wife was asking her one day, "Where are your children?" My wife actually knew where they were. And she said, "I don't know." And that's how many parents are today. In such an age, the very time when parents compassionately must, with a holy oversight, oversee their children, not to hurt them, not to control them, but to help them and to keep them from destroying their lives. Because sin, even if it is repented of and that young person comes back, it leaves scars. It leaves moral and spiritual scars, and it limits the purity that you can have. Protection number 7, don't waste time. This is a protection, a moral protection. It has wisely been said that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. An idle mind. God didn't make the mind to be idle. Ephesians 5:16 says, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Redeeming the time, buying the time. We have 24 hours in a day. We have however long our life is going to last. We don't know how long our life's going to last. Young people presume on the future, but that's foolish. God doesn't promise a future in this world. The Bible says today is the day of salvation. There's no promise of tomorrow. And the Bible warns about those that say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And teaches us to say, if God's willing, I will do this and that tomorrow. But I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And young people don't know, and the waste of time. Games and music and videos are a tremendous time waster, even if they're innocent. And the Bible so forcefully warns about this. For example, Proverbs 6:9. Proverbs 6, verse 9. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? Proverbs talks a lot about the sluggard, and never in a good way. When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. In fact, in Proverbs 18:9, the Bible warns that the sluggard, the time waster, is kin to the destroyer. In Proverbs 18, verse 9, he also that is slothful in his work is a brother to him that is a great waster. Time waster. That's why I preach against being late. Nepal is a late culture, a careless culture about time, because it's a Hindu culture. Why should they care about time? But God teaches us to care about time. And if you're late, you're wasting everybody's time. If there's a meeting, I prepare for that meeting, and I plan my day around that meeting, and I will work up until that meeting, and then I plan for that time to be in that meeting, and then I will come to that meeting. But if somebody comes late to that meeting, they've stolen time from me. Time is very important. And people say, how in the world do you get all that you do? How do you get it done? And I teach several hours a week in Nepal at our Bible college and in our church, and I write all the books and things. And one of the answers to that is, I don't waste time. I'm going to be doing something. The pastor came up tonight for the service and said, I hope you haven't been waiting long. Well, I'm always ready to wait because I have my work with me. And I'm going to have something to read. I'm going to have something to study. I'm going to have something to plan. And I won't be wasting that time and just sitting there unless it's doing something profitable. Sloth is a great sin. A great, great sin. And so parents need to be very careful to teach their children not to be slothful. There's a time to play. If a family wants to play a game together, to play even a harmless video game together, that's wonderful. That's fine. There's a time to play. But we must severely limit playtime because that's not the main purpose of life. And to let a child sit around, and spend hours and hours on something as empty as a video game is incredibly foolish. And that child is learning something about life, but it's all wrong. Youth should not be wasted. Youth is not given to us to just idle around and wait till I get old. Youth is given to us to prepare us for the coming days. And it must not be wasted, and that comes back to parents overseeing the child. If the child is not overseen, the child has foolishness bound in the heart, and the child will just waste his time. And so it comes back to parents being involved in their children's lives. Protection number 7, don't waste time. Young people can learn to do these things and must learn to do these things for themselves. And they can. And so that comes back to making sure as much as we can that our young people are saved. Because salvation will give them a desire to do right. And then to teach them biblical principles of how to protect themselves. Young people can themselves remove the temptations and dangers from their lives. You don't have to have your parent, somebody standing over you, watching you all the time. If you do, then as soon as they're not, you will sin. One young man wrote to me and said, before I got saved, I listened to rock music. I copied it to the memory cards on my phone. After I got saved, for some time, I didn't delete the songs. I used to say to myself that I would be able not to listen to them, but I was easily tempted to listen to the things that were already on my phone. I was making provision for the flesh while promising not to fulfill the lust of the flesh, Romans 13:14, and it never works. So one day, I decided to delete those songs totally from my memory card and from my computer. I thank the Lord, I have never regretted that decision. There's a wise young man making his own decisions before the Lord to protect himself. And he could listen to any music he wants to. He's not under his parents' authority anymore. But he wants to please the Lord. And that's the motivation of his life. So he is protecting himself in these ways. A young person, a single person, not under someone's authority can be open and accountable. Can have covenant eyes and have that report go to your parents or whoever you want it to go to. A youth pastor that I talked to recently said, I have a friend in Bible college who has the restriction codes to my phone. I cannot access the app store. I cannot access the browser. I personally deleted every game I had from the phone. I deleted Facebook and anything else I felt was drawing my mind away in ways that I thought were a hindrance to my walk with God. Example is Fox News. The app shows a lot of news, but spaced directly below it has a lot of entertainment news, which is basically, and that's true, soft porn. Fox News is no friend of godliness. I deleted that app as well. Now, this is a young man that's taking his relationship with the Lord seriously. No one's forcing him to do this. This is done because he loves the Lord and he wants to find God's will. If Snapchat or other items are a hindrance, the partner can block these. And so here's a young man that has a friend as a partner. And so protections, we've mentioned 7. And the last one is don't waste time. And that young people can do this for themselves. And that's the godly parent's goal, is to prepare all of the children, prepare all of the young people, and pass them on to the Lord, so to speak. And they are prepared to do these things, to serve the Lord and to purify their own lives before the Lord. And a young person can limit his own playtime. You don't have to have somebody looking over you all the time. If you love the Lord and you want to please the Lord, then you have to limit your own playtime and find profitable things to do. And there are so many profitable things to do. Learning how to study the Bible. One of the things we've talked about many times this week already is that young people learn how to have an effectual Bible study. And young people can do that. Most of them don't in Bible-believing churches. The vast majority. Because the vast majority of the adults don't have an effectual Bible study habit, let alone the teenagers. But there's no excuse for that. Here's a 12-hour course. I thought all of those would be gone already this week. I always overestimate the interest in these kinds of things. The very reason why I made this smaller Bible dictionary, very serious Bible dictionary, was for young people, to make it affordable so that every young person can learn how to study the Bible, learn how to interpret it, have his own dictionary there, look up the words, and that's exciting stuff. When you really start studying the Bible and really start understanding the Bible, that's thrilling stuff. Learning new skills, volunteering for service. There's all kinds of things that young people can do with their lives, but a young person has to learn to guard his own time. Parents must enforce these things as long as they can. And then the young people must step out on their own and apply the principles of the Word of God to their own lives.